All right, good morning. We're continuing through the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, and today we're going to be looking at verses 12 through 17. So let's dive right in. But first I want to ask you a question. How great is your God? All right, how great is your God? And I'm going to clarify that. So let's read this. Verse 12. Who else held the oceans in his hand? Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the world or has weighed out the mountain and the hills? The question, can God make a mountain so big that he can't lift it? Well, no, he can't. Who is able to advise the Spirit of the Lord? Who knows enough to be his teacher or his counselor? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good or what's best? It kind of reminds me of sometimes we as the church, or sometimes even as the leadership in the church, we're kind of like, well, God, he better listen to what I have to say, because if not, things are going to fall apart. And it's kind of like, no, God doesn't need my advice or my help. He's God. No, for all the nations of the world are nothing in comparison to him. They are but a drop in the bucket, dust in the scales. He picks up islands as though they had no weight at all. All of Lebanon's forests do not contain sufficient fuel to consume a sacrifice large enough to honor him. All Lebanon's sacrificial animals do not make an offering worthy of our God. The nations of the world are nothing to him. In his eyes, they are less than nothing, mere emptiness and froth. Man, that paints a picture of a pretty big God, of a pretty awesome God, a God that says, I don't need anything. In fact, there's nothing I can't do. Everything I made. Nothing made me. I made everything. I don't need your advice. I don't need your help. I don't need anything. In fact, if we're talking about sacrifices, you can't give me a sacrifice that is actually good enough to bring me honor and glory. That's a pretty big God. And so he's talking to Israel, because Israel, they're few in numbers and strength compared to their enemies. When they looked at Assyria and the Babylonians, he's like reminding, okay, this is who I am. But also at the same time, they were looking for a Messiah to come. He's like, listen, don't worry. I made a promise. I'm going to keep it. The Messiah is coming. Look at how big I am. Look at how big I am. I don't really need you. And there's nothing you can do for me that I don't already have or could make or could do myself. When we behold the greatness of God, we start to see everything in life in its proper perspective. When we see a huge God, then everything else kind of starts to get smaller. But when we see our circumstances or our problems first, then all of a sudden our God starts to get smaller. And so how great is your God? Is your God the gigantic God that is all powerful, or is he just this little guy that you kind of put in a box and like, I don't know if God maybe listen to me and get my advice. I know everything. So which God is your God? God is greater than anything on earth or in heaven. That's what it says. There's nothing here on earth. He is greater than the nations and their so-called gods. He founded the earth. He sits on the throne of heaven. Nothing is equal to or greater than our God. So how great is your God? When you behold, I'm going to say this again, when you behold the greatness of God, then you will see everything in life in its proper perspective. Do you hear that? When you behold the greatness of God. The God that named the stars knows you. And that's what it says in Luke 12:7. It says, how much is a sparrow worth? A few pennies. And yet God knows them. God even knows the numbers on how many hairs are on your head. He cares more about you than some sparrow. This great God, the same God that names the stars and cares about sparrows, loves you more than them. God cares about you, loves you, and wants you. So how great is your God? Someone defines circumstances as those nasty little things that take our eyes off of God. If you look at God through your circumstances, then he seems small and distant. But if you look at God and then your circumstances, all of a sudden he draws near. He draws near, and his greatness becomes greater to you. So how great is your God? How great is your God? Amen.